Are we about to see the US economy pick up? According to many people, the recent doldrums are due to nothing more than uncertainty. That's the word that keeps popping up. Macro uncertainty over, especially the presidential election, as well as interest rates, two of the topics that get repeated throughout mainstream sources. So, is it that presidential election uncertainty, along with interest rate uncertainty that's becoming more and more certain, are these the factors that are holding back the US economy? Because as we know, Americans themselves, as well as businesses, are telling us that the economy that they see is not so good. It's slowing down, job market is slowing down, and everything else. Searching for some reason why that might be, media sources, as well as just people filling in the blanks, have blamed the election and the Federal Reserve, like they're told to do. But is that actually the case? Is there more going on here? Are people just grasping at straws to try to explain what they otherwise can't explain, except that the economy is worse than most people are led to believe? That's really the biggest issue here. Is when we started out this year, everything was strong and resilient. The labor market was robust and booming. The unemployment rate was not a problem. So suddenly, according to most people who don't pay close attention to how things are going, it's as if things just changed all at once. So it must be either the Fed or the federal government. So, Steve, Mr. Van Meter, what's your take on all this? Are we just setting up for a huge boom once the election settles out and the Fed starts settling into rate cuts?
Jeff, that's what everyone wants to believe. And that's really important because we need something to believe in here, and the economy isn't in a place we can believe in it. But yet, what do we hear from Fed Chair Powell? That we're going to put monetary policy in a restrictive area, and that way we could pull back the reins and unleash demand. And then consumers want to believe it because they've loaded up on debt since the pandemic. They've been behind the curve with inflation, and they want nothing more right now than to see the economy boom. But the problem is, Jeff, is nobody wants to admit that the reality is when you inflate an economy with stimulus and you do a massive amount of it, there is an aftershock from this where the economy comes down when you pull the stimulus out. So what we've been seeing is this gradual trend of slower and slower growth. We know it's going to lead to a recession, but nobody wants to expect it because everyone bought into the narrative that we are going to boom. And the problem is we're not.
Does some of this, you think, Steve, have to do with expectations? As you're saying, we expected that the economy shot way up out of the lockdowns and the pandemic, and therefore, if it was going to experience a recession, it would be some degree of symmetry, right? It shoots way up, and then on the other side, it should shoot way down. And instead, we've been talking about this for the last couple of years. The slowdown has been gradual and gradual and gradual and gradual. In fact, it's been painfully elongated. And in that type of situation, it's understanding why people don't notice the slowdown. They think everything is just fine, just fine, just fine. And all of a sudden, it's not fine. And it's really just the slowdown has reached that critical danger zone where people start to realize it. And since they're realizing it in the middle of 2024, in the middle of election season, they're thinking, well, the economy was just fine yesterday, and today it doesn't seem to be as fine as I thought it was. So let's just reach out and figure out what must be happening. And absent any other explanation, because let's face it, you and I both know the Federal Reserve is not going to come clean unless they're really forced to. Even when they did last week cutting interest rates, what did they say? Well, we're cutting interest rates because the economy is fine. Most people don't really have the grounding in how things are going to really put any type of really solid explanation behind what's happening. So it's more an issue about explaining where we are rather than explaining where we're going to go once this thing happens. Because we were talking about this before. We've talked about this previously. How would a presidential election actually change the trajectory of the economy?
Yeah, that's right, Jeff. The same question we ask all the time is, how does an interest rate cut change the direction of the economy? Because what we were told, during the pandemic, of course, is there's all this stimulus, and that once the stimulus hits the economy is going to boom afterwards, which it did, but we're going to be at a new normal. We're at a new high. But the reality is, Jeff, and you're a study of monetary history, you can look back to every instance where some sort of government somewhere in the world pumps up the economy, it comes crashing down, not just to where it was before, but below that. And this time, it's just been so slow, as you said, that no one wants to actually believe that we're going to go into recession or there could be a massive drop in the future. So the explanation is simple. Why is the economy slowing? Well, it had to do with the Fed. Oh, it has to do with the election. But when you ask people, how do these impact your day-to-day finances? How does it impact your decision to go buy a car or a house or to even go out to dinner? And the reality is nobody has an answer. They're just looking for the reason the economy is slowing. And the truth is that we yanked all the stimulus out and then we're on the path back to where we need to be.
And that's, I mean, there is some, at least apparent logic. It does sound plausible, right? When we talk about interest rates in particular, if you think the Fed broke it, then you think the Fed can fix it. So if you believe that, okay, the Fed has said all along that we're trying to slow the economy down, and then suddenly the economy appears to be slowing down, you think, well, the Fed can just fix it by cutting interest rates. So again, we're back to this black box type of illusion where people, their understanding of the economy is centered on the federal government or the Federal Reserve in one way or the other. We've kind of lost touch with the idea that the private economy is actually what matters. It's about incomes and jobs, not necessarily what one government is doing in one capacity and another agency of the government is doing in another capacity. So it's not the case that rate hikes slowed the economy down and have created this danger for the recession. And so the Fed cutting rates doesn't fix what's wrong. As we've been saying all along, the Fed cutting rates is in response to the private economy that's going wrong, that people don't understand why the private economy could be going wrong or what it is that is going wrong in the private economy.
That's absolutely right, Jeff, because the Fed wants people to believe in the power of the Fed. And the media does a great job of pushing that out to the public, and then everyone buys into it and they believe that, oh, if the Fed cuts rates, it's going to unleash the economy. Liquidity is going to pour in, stocks are going to soar. But yet the reality is none of that actually happens because, as you just said, the Fed is a reactionary agency. And if you believed in the fact the funds rate did something, which you and I know does absolutely nothing, they're not proactive in it. If they were, they should have said, hey, we know based on our economic models that the long and variable lags, we need to be cutting rates like a year before. But they don't do that at all. And then, of course, the Fed somehow massively gets lucky every time that something goes wrong in the economy. They point fingers and say, see, not us, because we cut rates, everything's fine. But people do need something to believe in because, as I kind of said earlier, households are loaded up in debt. They've been behind the curve. They're seeing their hours at work get cut. They're seeing some of their friends or even their own job get lost. And they're getting on the unemployment line saying there's no opportunity. And then they look in the news and what do they see? Factories around the world are saying demand's going away. We're cutting people, we're cutting hours, and hope goes away. So you need something to believe in. And maybe it's central bankers, maybe it's the election. The problem is those don't cause people to go out and spend, and they don't fix the income. So it doesn't matter who's president. It doesn't matter if the Fed keeps cutting rates. People's incomes aren't magically going to go up the next day. But we need that to happen. The problem is they're going down, and there's nothing in sight that I see is going to change that trajectory.
That's really the thing, right, Steve? It's that people see that the labor market is slowing down. Their hours are being cut. We have evidence for that. Americans tell us that they're worried about the labor market. Their hours are going down. There are no jobs. Whether or not there's layoffs or how many layoffs there are isn't really the matter here. Recession is all about hiring. And what Americans have said, what the data shows is that nobody's hiring. And so how do we connect that with whoever wins the next presidential election? How does the next presidential election impact you getting more hours back in your job? I mean, there is no way to connect those two dots. So what's really happening here is people are at a loss to explain why their hours are being cut. And so they're thinking, well, I heard somewhere somebody say there's uncertainty about the presidential election. And so if the election happens and there's no more uncertainty, then that fixes whatever reason I got my hours cut. And it's the same type of faulty thinking that we just talked about with interest rates. Why did my friend lose his job, or why is there no one hiring? Well, is it because the Fed hiked rates? And if that's the case, then if the Fed lower rates, suddenly people will start hiring again. It comes down to lack of understanding of why things are happening, not what is happening, because we know what is happening. And the fact that people are talking about the presidential election as uncertainty tells you again that they know things are not going in the right direction. They just don't know why that is.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Jeff, because I've worked at another number of jobs in the past, and I've never gotten hired because a company said, hey, you know what? The Fed just cut interest rates, so we need to hire. Or, so and so became president, so we need to hire. Because the reality is, it's all about new orders and it's all about the existing workload. And this is something that I know workers see. They go to work, and then back in the boom times, there was, the fax machine was running, as I like to say, and orders were flooding in, and there was all these backlogs around, and they had work to do. And the problem is, those backlogs are going away. They're probably nearly gone. And the fax machine isn't running right now. And maybe the email's broken too. I don't know. But all we know is there isn't order demand coming in. And that's leading the employer's decision. Even if the Fed were to cut 100 basis points or 200 basis points, not one more job is going to be created, because until the orders come in, nothing changes.
Yeah, maybe it's the rotary phones. Everybody's trying to dial in the new orders using a rotary phone. They forgot the fax machine, forget emails, forget smartphones. Let's go back and maybe they'll use a telex machine next time or something like that. But the point is, I mean, it's really it's understandable why we're having this discussion. It's understandable why this has become a mainstream topic, because, like you said, everything that we do nowadays is supposed to be related to some government decision somewhere about something. That's everything distills down to. This central idea and this central place is the reason why this happens. And the narrative has been embedded in our consciousness and our expectations really since the late 1990s. I mean, this whole idea with Greenspan and the Greenspan put, which there's no evidence there ever was one. But again, that was a narrative that was developed to try to explain the previously unexplained. And it has just gotten worse and worse and worse. As you said, whenever anything happens, when it's about the markets or the economy, who's the first person you see on TV? There's a Federal Reserve official. There's Jay Powell's face plastered everywhere. So if something happens, it must be because the Fed did something or the government did something else. That's what we're conditioned to believe. And so there's a lot of people who are thinking, well, once we clear up the election, once Jay Powell starts cutting rates, there's a boom waiting for the economy. And because that's why the economy sucks to begin with. At least we're at that point where we're no longer saying strong and resilient. We're no longer pretending that everything's just fine. Now people are at least looking for an explanation why they suddenly realize things are not fine.
Yeah, and Jeff, we need to understand why things aren't right. And I think that's what a lot of people want to believe. Well, was it because of the Fed or because of an election? No, it has everything to do with economic fundamentals. Because when we go into recession, there's something that shows up more often than not, and that's inflation running above incomes or close enough where people aren't getting ahead and they have to take on more and more debt. And when that happens, of course, there's a point where households say, hey, I can't keep this pace up. I have to change my spending habits because my debt service costs are going up too much. So they start to cut their spending. That makes perfect sense. So you have this effect that consumers have been way behind inflation. The economy is not booming and turning around like they were told it's going to. And so they're starting to see their hours work get cut, as we talked about. They're seeing people lose their job and not be able to get another one. So what's the natural reaction? Are you going to go out and just say, hey, you know what? It's okay if I lose my job. I'll just spend a lot of money because that's what the Federal Reserve wants me to do by cutting interest rates. No, that's not how it works. They say, hey, wait a minute. If I lose my job, and my buddy just lost his in the same industry and he can't even get an interview, then I'm in trouble. I need to start saving money. And that's what we're seeing. Now, granted, the savings rate isn't going skyrocket levels, but its upward trend is suggesting that as incomes go down and stay, of course, behind inflation and savings rates go up, it means that households don't have the capacity to spend. And that's exactly what we've been seeing in the survey data.
And it's not just, I mean, the confidence data too, right? And I mean, there is a very strong historical correlation between consumer confidence and not consumer spending. Most people believe it's consumer confidence leads to changes in consumer spending. That's not the real correlation. Consumer confidence corresponds very closely to unemployment and employment numbers. It's not about, oh, I'm confident I'm going to go out and spend. It's I'm less confident because my neighbor and my cousin and my friend down the street has just said, oh, my boss was talking about how I'm going to get laid off, or my boss was saying that I need to cut back hours from two people that I know. So consumer confidence is directly related to basically this labor market grapevine. It's a very good detector for changes in the employment situation, the unemployment rate too, even payrolls. the conference board's measure of consumer confidence corresponds pretty well with payrolls, changes in direction in the payroll report. And so when consumers in the Americans in general say, I don't like what's going on here, and I need to find some way to explain it, I'm going to talk about the presidential election, or I'm going to talk about the Fed and its rate hikes. What they're really saying is, I'm less confident. And the reason I'm less confident is because I have all of this information on an individual basis that things are not going well. And I would like to know, at least put together some reason why that is. So again, the point here is the very discussion about the presidential election or the rate cycle from the Federal Reserve is itself a strong indicator that things are not going in the way everybody would like.
Yeah. And Jeff, so you mentioned there's not a direct relationship between consumer sentiment and spending, but you did identify, of course, the perfect one, which is the labor market. And so then you take that as people go on unemployment, their incomes go down. And if your income goes down, well, you have to spend less. And you certainly can't get a loan because the bank's not going to say, hey, wait, you don't have a job, no problem, have some more credit. So their incomes go down, their spending goes down, and retail sales go down. And the next thing you know, the circle just starts to complete itself, that one thing leads to another. That's the issue here that we're facing, is that, everyone's hoping that, their candidate will get elected and they'll change the economy. But history shows, and we talked about this before the show, that really doesn't change anything with the economy any more than rate cuts. The problem is the trajectory we are on with, of course, the unemployment rate and the labor market suggests that there's nothing that's going to change that. And we're seeing nothing in the data to indicate otherwise.
I don't know who sits there and says, I was going to hire 4 people this week, but I'm not sure who's going to win the next election. That just doesn't happen. Or I was going to hire three more people next month, but I'm not sure where the Fed's interest rate, short-term interest rate might be. Forget about the fact that market interest rates have been pretty clear. I'm only concerned about the Fed's interest rate. It's understandable because people don't pay enough attention to how the economies work. And then the media does such a bad job of educating people because everything is filtered through either the Feds or the federal government or the Federal Reserve. But it's the election, the Federal Reserve, they're not going to magically fix what's wrong, because just like most consumers, up until recently, they said there was nothing wrong. They're new to this as much as consumers and Americans are.